Hey, everybody. All right, so good afternoon. Let's begin at the end. Say your product, your software is running inside your customer's environment. Straightforward installs and updates deliver continuous value that makes your product well worth the cost, not just to one customer, but many customers. And we know this is not easy. Successful enterprises, the most, exciting end customers tend to have something to protect, their own proprietary customer data, internal practices, solutions, source code. Enterprises have to defend against accidental exfiltration or malicious infiltration. Basically kind of an obstacle course, a gauntlet. Network policies are intentionally restrictive, security policies that scan and limit your software's functionality. It's challenging to get your software running the way it's intended so that the customer immediately understands what value they get from your software. Like everybody's busy. So when they turn their attention to evaluate your product, you want as little time as possible in getting the product in the door. So how do you do that? When you run a gauntlet, I think it's good to practice non-fatally beforehand. So as a product manager at Replicated, focused on Compatibility Matrix, otherwise known as CMX, I'm excited to share with you how we're evolving CMX to essentially be the staging environment for the multitude of production environments you deploy into. So what's CMX? Some of you here might already be using CMX, I hope. With CMX, you can easily spin up ephemeral VMs and clusters. People use it for ad hoc testing to troubleshoot customer issues, or they integrate it into their CI, like via GitHub Actions, and they hook up like Kubernetes matrix testing across key distributions and versions. In particular, getting an OpenShift cluster to run very quickly is a good way to represent a common enterprise infrastructure scenario. But what else can CMX do for you? In commercial software distribution, there's a real mental shift from the SaaS deploy model that many of us spent years steeped in, including me. You have a production environment you can be very opinionated about to best facilitate scaling and delivery for your exact software. Staging is tuned to reasonably represent that, but with commercial software distribution, instead of having that degree of control over production and staging, you got customers that are similarly opinionated about their production environments. They deploy their own software too. So their opinions carry over to how they want your software deployed to them. So staging here is very different from SaaS idea of staging. It's not just one staging for one production, roughly, but it's kind of like a matrix to stage critical problems you'll encounter when deploying to these multiple adversarial productions. One key investment we've been making with CMX is to give you and ourselves maximal flexibility. We're positioning ourselves for excellent coverage for all the different customer scenarios you'll encounter as you successfully scale. We're moving from alpha towards beta of our VM functionality. The idea here is to get us closer, to the bare metal. So we have more control and flexibility, and so you have more control and flexibility as well in running a realistic gauntlet. Today, we'll take a closer look at a preview of a new feature that's moving towards alpha. Network policy violation reporting gives you a sense of how we'll support you in setting up your customer for success. And the goal here, I want to leave you excited to get in touch. If CMX is to be effective staging for you, we need your perspective. Replicated has years of experience helping customers like you. We've developed a sense of the overall patterns that trip up successful installs again and again in these adversarial enterprise environments. So, we need your feedback. And to be sure that this is a good collaboration, I'm just going to state my working assumptions for evolving CMX. First, this goal is not like 100% parity with those end customer environments. There's just always some kind of unknown. Like some enterprise customer has a particular very no security policy. The configuration is not something we could have anticipated, trips up the install. So the goal is not to perfectly replicate all of these end customer environments. Staging is not production, but we want to put you in a position of confidence to have good conversations with that customer, and just knowing that you've accounted for most of the likely roadblocks. Second, good fences make good neighbors. So the expertise split here is you're the expert on how your application runs, and we're the expert in the different enterprise scenarios that you're deploying to. So we don't know what tests you should run to ensure your application is working how it's supposed to work, but we can build you ephemeral VMs and clusters that delivers the end customer environment. So you can begin with the end in mind. And finally, we know that if it's not easy to use, you'll skip it. I mean, we all do. We want a good staging environment so that the errors don't come forth in production, so to speak. And if it's really annoying to test, it's not going to happen. Fill in production instead then. So sometimes that's okay, but you just don't know. You can't know for sure what trips up that customer that's closing in on understanding the value of your product. So we want to make it easy to test. To get to that like easy degree of confidence when you ship, whether it's for that initial install or like ongoing updates. So those are the assumptions we're building on, but we're also building on CMX's existing foundation, which is our Kubernetes clusters that you can just now test on. If you want to use CMX right now, it's available. Some are cloud clusters that we manage for you. We run warm pools so that you can spin these up very quickly as needed. Some of these run on VMs that we manage, and our recent investments make it more accessible to spin up VMs and handle networking across those VMs. On this VM base, we can go up the stack, and then we can offer some of these really important permutations that put together simulate the end enterprise environment. At the very bottom, we've got the architecture of the machine. ARM definitely is something that we're seeing in greater prevalence across those enterprise environments. Kubernetes distributions, I say enterprise, but commercial and customer. Kubernetes distributions, we have everything from the more local run on VM options kind K3s to some of the cloud services that are very popular, EKS, GKE, AKS, to being able to just test the embedded cluster curl that's part of your replicated deployment or release, and of course OpenShift, which is very representative of end customers that we see. Versions of Kubernetes, of course, can introduce complications if something you have in your YAML file is suddenly deprecated, it can impact that customer. Digging something that is on our future roadmap, the hardened OSes that we see in more high security customers, STIG, FIPS, GovCloud. What we'll talk about a bit more, network policies, air gap, different kinds of allow list and deny list configurations, and including also network topologies like proxies, man-in-the-middle proxies. So again, this is not intended to be a comprehensive walk. It's just to describe this model, of a stack with different layers and permutations to test against. And some of these are future roadmap items. But today, I'll show you our network policy violation reporting preview. We have a prototype, but soon an alpha CLI that you can try. So let's say to get started, we just think about like a simple K3s cluster. And we assign a network policy, air gap for the strictest example. Now, your policy has been applied. Your pod is running inside the K3s cluster, inside a VM that CMX is running for you. And let's say suddenly some process on your pod makes an external network call. The air gap policy blocks the network egress, but that's just like in the air gap customer environment. But unlike in the customer environment, our probe collects the necessary information to help you understand what happened. So you can keep, in mind whether you have to modify your application so it doesn't rely on the internet anymore, or if your customer needs to know, like what they need to add to the allow list to get the benefit of your application. And the thing is, like, it's sometimes surprising the network calls that your application will require, especially, as the functionality evolves. Like previously covered with security vulnerabilities, some of these are just from third-party dependencies that make a call during runtime. And some sleuthing can be required to figure out what is and is not a network call that's critical to your application's functioning. So to help you orient your customer, we help you with this sleuthing. You run your application on the CMX cluster with a network policy applied, and you can see where the request originated, what command, what pod, so you can identify where the source is. And then you can also see what the destination is. Even though the egress out of the network is blocked, we can enhance the destination IP and resolve the DNS for you. So you can say like, hey, this is going to google.com. And ultimately, we want to give you confidence so that you have this data to figure out what exactly should go on that allow list and set up a good conversation about the trade-offs the customer should make to make sure they can modify their own network defense for the benefits of using your product. And please note, the strict air gap policy can be applied to the network itself. So your application will just error out, but you can also have an open policy so that your application will run as needed, doesn't error out, but will present you with a report of all of the issues that would have occurred within an air gap policy. So that way you can modify your application, try it in the environment. It's kind of like, training for the obstacle course, and then you can run the real gauntlet, or as close as you can get before deploying to the customer. So the network policy, of course, is just one layer of the stack of the defenses and the infrastructure that varies from enterprise customer to, customer to customer that you're deploying to. In commercial software distribution, many problems just come down to, is this an issue with my application or with my application in this particular environment? When you're delivering your product with all of its modular pieces and dependencies into an adversarial environment, what trouble you run into is basically complicated collisions between pieces of your application and those obstacles. So CMX wants to help by making the complication just more approachable. We want to help you get to a simple output, the confidence that when you deliver to your customers, you can say, hey, this is what's required and why, and this is exactly what's happening. This is a worthwhile trade-off to make. To get to this simple output, we want to manage a lot of the complexity, between all of these different permutations of VMs, clusters, network and security policies. So you just focus on running the gauntlet, not setting up the obstacle course to simulate the end customer environment. That's what we want to do. So of course the engineers amongst us would be suspicious. Well, what are the abstractions that we're introducing that might itself potentially introduce complications? Want to walk through the model, a bit high level of what we are managing for you with CMX. The inputs that we get from you in terms of from what is passed through the command line, GitHub Actions, or from the vendor portal, we just want to understand the desired state of the resource that's needed, whether you're specifying exactly, what cluster, what specific configuration, what distribution, or if it's a permutation that we can configure to simulate a very common type of to represent one of those end customer environments. We know that the inputs can change at any time. So CMX has a cluster provisioner that checks your desired state on a loop every 5 seconds. And it manages, we have controllers that manage the resources for you, cloud controllers that manage AWS, GCP, Azure, Oracle. Remember that we manage the warm pools so that you can get access to these resources much more quickly than you might otherwise. Ephemeral resources, clusters, and also VM controllers, our own fleet of VMs, Firecracker, libvirt for OpenShift, OKD is the open source distro of that. And on another 5-second loop, we're managing those resources, making sure that the resources are reconciled with your desired state. And a lot of the investments that we've been making recently have been to speed and stability improvements as we're scaling. We're updating our overlay network to be more robust as we're growing our offerings. And that, I believe, is a critical prerequisite as we're moving to offer better coverage for all of these enterprise environment permutations. We want to give you those customer representative environments. So I'll with all of this, I'll end where we started with CMX as the staging environment for the variety of adversarial production environments that you don't control, but have confidence shipping into. So thanks for your time. I hope to hear from you, but if you have any questions here, I'm happy to answer as well.
All right. Thank you, Han. I want to just reiterate, I think, the value of this reporting, right? It's actually very difficult to get this kind of insight into an application. And I think we've seen a lot of customers run across challenges trying to actually understand if their application is making outbound requests, what it actually is requesting when it's doing that. And so being able to really document that, understand that, and get insight into it automatically with every version you're testing, I think is a really important kind of documentation, security insight that we're able to provide. So really, really unique offering in CMX. I think when in Honda, do we is there a how can folks kind of get in touch with you to get this started and try things out as it's kind of coming about?
If you're connected in Slack, probably the easiest way to shoot a Slack message over, or go ahead and send an email, Han@Replicated.